Good evening, Houdat Nation, and a happy Wednesday on a Thursday to our Bayou Blitz family. It feels like a while since we have said that, but I hope everybody is doing well out there. I am Bob Rose. I am one of your time-traveling hosts to your Bayou Blitz podcast. Joining me is my partner with a new backdrop tonight, Brendan Boylan. How are you tonight, Brendan?
I'm doing good. I got the desk done before the show started. That was the goal, because having to sit on the floor and do it would have been tough. But new desk, new backdrop for now. Lots of Saints news from the last time you and I were on. Lots to get into. Monitoring a couple things as well. Jari Evans potentially has the potential to be named to the Hall of Fame tonight, so we'll be monitoring that as well. So yeah, there's a lot going on. I do want to throw it out there to all you people in the chat, because Bob and I were just talking about it. You Pels fans, how you feeling? I'm just curious. No deadline moves. Just curious how you guys are feeling. We won't go too much into that because that's not this type of show. But as a basketball enthusiast, I'm just curious how you guys feel, because my team won the deadline, which isn't saying much because we're got 10 wins this year. But they actually did something that made me excited. So as did the Saints. It's not officially official yet, right? Because it can't be. But it's as close to signed, sealed, and delivered as we can get. And that is the Saints clearing house of most of their offensive coaching staff, which opens the door for Klint Kubiak to join the New Orleans Saints as their offensive coordinator following the Super Bowl on Sunday. Bob, this was one of your two guys. You had him penciled in from the start as a finalist for the position in your eyes, a guy that needed to be considered very heavily, and a guy that has climbed the coaching ranks over the last few years and is one of those guys that is definitely deserving of his shot. For the people that haven't tuned in and week out and heard your analysis or read your article, shame on them. What makes Klint Kubiak the perfect fit for the New Orleans Saints as the offensive coordinator?
Well, first of all, congratulations to the New Orleans Saints. I think you got yourself a good one, and congratulations to Klint Kubiak, for this step up on the resume. Clint's only 37 years old, not even. He's going to be 37 at the end of the month. But I've always loved Klint Kubiak. I always liked the Kubiak family. First and foremost, you're talking about a guy with football in his DNA. He's one of the sons to Gary Kubiak, former backup quarterback to John Elway with the Denver Broncos. Very, very successful offensive coordinator in his own right, Gary was, as well as head coach of the Houston Texans and the Super Bowl 50 champion Denver Broncos. In addition, Klint has worked on the staffs of Mike Shanahan, two-time Super Bowl winning head coach. Worked on the staff of obviously Kyle Shanahan as well, and has worked with Brian Griese, another up-and-coming, fairly young coach in the NFL. The thing is, and Alan and I talked about this last night, a lot of Saints fans, even if you don't like the Kansas City Chiefs, even if you don't like the San Francisco 49ers, or in my case, if you hate both teams, you're going to be tuning in for Sunday's Super Bowl because you probably want to take a closer look at the San Francisco 49ers offense. A couple things about Klint's system that I love, and this is really the 49ers system too over the last couple years. They beat defenses by using a lot of motion and a lot of different formations to create mismatches for their top players. They use the versatility of their running backs. They use their wide receivers as runners, in addition to all three levels, and they use their their tight ends as legitimate pass catchers in addition to run blockers for the rushing attack. As far as the running game, what we're going to expect to see from Kubiak is something that, again, we've always seen from the Kubiak family, from the Shanahan family. Zone blocking, tandem blocking, one-cut rushing schemes. This is right up the alley for someone of Alvin Kamara's skill set, for someone of Kendre Miller's skill set, and for even a downhill runner like Jamal Williams. Not a lot of cuts, not a lot of delays behind the line of scrimmage. It's a downhill one cut scheme and go. they don't want their runners to run into the teeth of the defense. They want to set up mismatches with, again, tandem blocking up front, which requires a lot of athletic offensive linemen, somewhat on the smaller side, but you definitely have to be good athletes and you have to be smart. So we know that Kubiak has a challenge in front of him, for rebuilding, retooling that offensive line. But it's not a system that puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback to win games by himself, to sit back there for 5, 6, 7 seconds at a time, needing 5, 6, 7 seconds at a time of protection. It's a very simple passing attack. It's complex for defenses to have to deal with. It's complex for receivers to have to learn. But with the quarterback, you're only making usually 3 reads, at most, and then that ball is out of your hand. With always a check down option available to you, and always threats on all 3 levels of the defense. Terrific spacing for a Klint Kubiak offense. That's another thing that I like about his scheme, about the Shanahan scheme as well. And again, they create mismatches. You're not necessarily asking your best players, putting your best players in positions that aren't suitable for their top skills. Something, again, I've always admired out of the Shanahan Kubiak system. You can almost see, again, growing up a Denver Broncos fan, following the Kubiaks, following the Shanahans for quite some time, I can almost envision the way certain Saints players are going to fit into this system if Kubiak brings a lot of these concepts and schemes with him to New Orleans.
Well, and one of those things, and one thing that I'll certainly be watching for in the Super Bowl, is the use of Deebo Samuel. You and I were talking earlier this week, texting back and forth. We'll see if I can get this thing out of my throat. I did. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe that's what we get for moving the show to a Thursday. But we were texting back and forth about the use of Deebo Samuel and how unique it was. Where, yes, he's a joker type of a role, but he's a wide receiver that gets thrown in motion a lot. He's a receiver that lines up in the backfield a lot. He's a guy that is a chess piece that gets moved around. And naturally, Saints fans or other analysts want to go, well, they could do the same thing with Alvin Kamara. They could do the same thing with Taysom Hill, a guy like Chris Olave, who's a skilled route runner, very high football IQ. But you and I were talking, and we said, no, like Rashid Shaheed is the guy that should be used in that role. So I want you guys to watch the Super Bowl very carefully. And if you guys are curious enough and you want to go dig down a rabbit hole, go watch some Niners tape. This year and even last year of how they were using Deebo Samuel, and then kind of clip it in your mind and then envision the skill set of Rashid Shaheed in a similar role, and how that can open up the offense, not just for Shaheed, but like Bob said, some of those other skilled playmakers, the Taysom Hills of the world, the Alvin Kamaras. If the Saints in the offense want to get, real fancy and throw us in I don't even know. Like, it would be some complex pistol set where you have Kamara on one side, Kendre Miller on one side, and then maybe you have, Shaheed lined up behind the quarterback and you get some crazy stuff going. Those are the things, right, that we're lacking for the New Orleans Saints offensively. The imagination of it all over the last few years. It might be a weak term to throw out, but we didn't see a whole lot of backyard football from the New Orleans Saints over the years, and just being like, let's get weird, right? Like, let's get weird. Let's have a good time. Let's try things because we have such skilled players all over the field. That's something the Kubiak offense is going to bring to New Orleans. It's going to bring a different vibe. It's going to be a breath of fresh air, and certainly so, right? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Like, Pete Carmichael is the longest tenured coordinator in NFL history from what we could find, right? We've seen the same offense for so long, which tells you what, Bob? So has the entire league.
Yeah.
The entire league knows the playbook, and what to expect. Now, Sean and Drew certainly put a Band-Aid over that over the years and made it a little harder, a little bit more complex when you have those type of offensive minds. And certainly Carmichael is a great offensive mind as well, but it got stale, right? It was that last piece of cake that you're like, man, that sounds really good. And then you realize it's been sitting out for about a week and you're like, probably time to make a new cake. And that's what happened for New Orleans. And Kubiak is a guy, and we haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about Debo Samuel. We're talking about motions, right? Saints were second to last in the league in pre-snap motion, where the Niners are first in pre-snap motion. We just talked about, what Shaheed could mean in the offense. We haven't talked about, Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara. And obviously, when they were both playing in the NFC South, the type of comparisons those two would get. Look at the season Christian McCaffrey just had. And I feel for him. Like, Lamar's probably going to win MVP. And deservingly so. He showed me an element this year of passing the football that he had not in previous years. He improved. He brought a different layer to the Baltimore offense. But, man, I'd make the case that McCaffrey should be the first running back to win MVP since Adrian Peterson. Like, I would make that case. That's how good of a year he had. Well, if you're bringing that offensive mind to New Orleans with Alvin Kamara, who Bob and I have said for 3 or 4 years now has been an underutilized asset of the Saints offense, I could see Kamara really have a bounce back year. Now, his age might be a little concerning, but the dude's an uber athlete. We know what he's capable of, and we're not asking him to have the speed and the elusiveness, as McCaffrey. He does have those qualities, but we don't necessarily need that. We just need get him the ball in space, right? Don't make this difficult. Don't run him up the middle 20 times a game, right? Allow him to preserve energy to where he can get to the outside, he can get in space, he can make a guy miss, and then boom, you have a big play. With what you were saying, Bob, with just kind of the zone blocking scheme, the one cuts. What's the one thing New Orleans didn't have this year, right? They didn't have a run of over 20 yards, which is insane to think throughout 17 games. The Saints didn't record a single run of over 20 yards with Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, who led the league in rushing touchdowns last year, Taysom Hill, who, how many big runs have we seen from Taysom Hill over his time in New Orleans? That zone blocking scheme is going to do wonders for everybody I just mentioned. And Kendre Miller. I think that fits Kendre Miller extremely well. It's going to open up lanes for, just for the punny people out there. It's going to open up running lanes, obviously, but it's going to open up a whole nother chapter and page to what the Saints can do offensively. There's so many things I like about this hire. There's so many things we'll talk about, not just tonight, but, moving forward. The Saints had their eyes on somebody. I had somebody, and forgive me because lots of messages over Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Somebody messaged me a couple weeks ago and said, like, could the Saints wait any longer, right, to get an offensive coordinator? And my response was, they're clearly going after someone on the staff of one of the two teams in the Super Bowl. Be patient. It's going to happen, but they have their guy. They're going to get their guy. They just can't announce anything. No news can break because the Super Bowl. Now, Adam Schefter, being Adam Schefter, is like, he breaks the news and it's all but, a done deal. Great. Fantastic. We still won't have the official word until Monday, Tuesday, something like that. So with all that, it's going to be a big change for the Saints offense, and with a big change at the top of the offensive coaching tree, that means there's a lot of changes throughout the Saints offensive coaching staff. It is very literally the like that final scene of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Will Smith is just standing in the house by himself, looking around. That's how it is for a couple members of the Saints offensive staff, because honestly, outside of tight ends coach and a couple like assistants, Jari Evans being a name, right, on that list too of assistant coaches, like there's not anybody left. Ronald Curry leaves for the job with the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, Pete Carmichael gets fired, and the list just kind of crumbles and collapses. You and I talked about this a little bit ago, Bob, and I compared it to college. All the years that I covered college sports, is very rarely does a new head coach, offensive coordinator, what have you, come in and they're told, hey, you got to keep all these assistants,
Mhm.
right? 9 times out of 10, probably 9.8% of the time, it is, here is your team, do what you want. They're here if you want them. If you don't, we'll pink slip them right now. And well, the Saints really pink slipped everybody. So with that, you mentioned the strong connections Kubiak and that family has had in the NFL over the last however many decades, right? Who do you envision Klint Kubiak going after to bring on to his staff? If you just had a couple names to throw out.
Oh man, I mean, there's a few names. First of all, you mentioned Clancy Barone, reportedly sticking around at least at this point as the tight ends coach. Well, Clancy used to work with Gary Kubiak in Denver, and obviously Klint Kubiak was a lower tiered assistant on a few of those staffs. So there's one tie right there, for you folks that are wondering why Clancy Barone was kept around, because he's familiar. A couple other. Listen, the Saints need a quarterback coach, a running back coach, a wide receiver coach, and an offensive line coach. And that's just as we sit here this evening. That's with Barone sticking around. That's with Jari Evans sticking around, and there's no 100% guarantee, that either one will. But a few names to watch. Brian Griese, who the Saints, by the way, remember, have already interviewed, so they've already set groundwork there. Brian Griese or Clay Kubiak, another Gary son, and obviously brother of Clint. Each of them were assistant quarterback coaches for the San Francisco 49ers. I expect one of them to probably get promoted to Clint's spot. The other one I would expect to land in New Orleans. And I'd love either hire. Both guys, Clay is a little bit younger. Brian has a little bit less coaching experience, but 8 or 9 years as an NFL quarterback too. Great football mind, already highly respected in the coaching community. So I would expect one of these two guys, to land in New Orleans, as probably the quarterback coach. Offensive line, John Benton, we're hearing is a front runner for the position right now. John Benton was a New Orleans Saints replacement player during the 1987 strike season. So our friend John Forcade, he was blocking for our friend John Forcade, back in the day. Benton, also worked on Kyle Shanahan's San Francisco staff from 2017 to 20, and worked with Robert Saleh, with the New York Jets the last couple of years, who obviously came from the 49ers staff. So again, familiar face there. If they don't go Benton at offensive line, watch for a couple names. There's James Craig, the assistant offensive line coach for the 49ers, former LSU assistant. Actually he was on Coach O's staff when Joe Burrow and that group won the national championship. Another guy to watch is Joe Graves, another assistant line coach for the 49ers. Covington, Louisiana native, coached at Southeast Louisiana, coached at Louisiana Monroe. So obviously he has ties in the Gulf Coast region. And, we're mentioning these guys not just because they have ties to Klint Kubiak, but the 49ers offensive line is arguably top 3 in the NFL. And I doubt you can name 2 teams that are better than them. They are just that darn good. I mean, remember, this 49ers team that gave up only 28 sacks to Brock Purdy, led the league in rushing touchdowns, and was third in rushing yardage. And that isn't all a one-man show. With Christian McCaffrey, those are the big uglies blocking for him in front of them. So watch for these guys. Leonard Hankerson might be a long shot, but he's the wide receiver coach for the 49ers. You're obviously familiar with Clint. And again, this isn't just a buddy system. Oh, I'm going to hire my friends. These are guys that are familiar with what Klint Kubiak wants to do for an offensive system. That's why familiar faces are important. Guys that know the system, guys that know the people that you're working with, know what kind of boss Kubiak is going to be, and can presumably vouch for Dennis Allen since he's one of the guys that hired Clint in the first place. So Leonard Hankerson, former wide receiver with the Washington Redskins, and yeah, I didn't say that tongue in cheek. They were still the Redskins when Leonard played for them. A couple years now with San Francisco, and one thing that you could say about the 49ers is they have solid receiving depth. They can turn guys, late round picks, undrafted guys, into serviceable complementary weapons. Couple other guys to watch. Rick Dennison, not from the 49ers staff, but long ties. Rick Dennison goes back with Gary Kubiak all the way back to when they were both players with the Denver Broncos. Dennison was with Gary for 3 different coaching stops. 2 of those was with Klint Kubiak, including Clint's most recent stop before San Francisco, that being the Minnesota Vikings. Rick Dennison has a lot of experience as an offensive coordinator, a lot of experience as an offensive line coach. Very, very respected. He would add a lot of experience. And remember, as much as you may like Klint Kubiak, and we both do, he's relatively inexperienced as a play caller. So, so a guy like Rick Dennison, who's been there, done that a long time, would definitely help in a, kind of a consultant's role. We talked about familiar ties. We talked about possibly Clint's brother, Clay, joining him. Why not make it a family affair? Gary Kubiak has been, retired and unretired 2 or 3 times as a coach. Maybe he comes back to help his son get a firm footing as a play caller. Gary could help out with the quarterbacks. He could help Clint out. He could help out with the wide receivers. You have a ton of NFL experience there. And a few championship rings to show for that experience. 3 as an assistant coach Gary has, and obviously 1 as a head coach. These are just a few of the names to watch for. I would expect that this team is going to end up landing Greasy or Clay Kubiak for sure, and then watch for one of those offensive line coaches that Clint has experience with as well.
I'm glad you brought up the point that we're not just bringing up people because it's a buddy system or because they have Louisiana or Gulf Coast ties, because in any job, right, it is so important the people that you work with. Like, who you work with can make or break your job. You guys know what I'm talking about. You guys working 9 to 5s out there. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. You guys also know the people or the bosses that left and took another job and then called you and were like, hey, I just took another job somewhere else. We'd love to have you. And sometimes you're like, hell yeah, let's do it. And other times you're like, I really didn't like you that much.
Right. Gonna pass, but good luck.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so important. It's so important to have those ties and know what people want. I have one of my directors when I was working college sports. He's now at Indiana State University. Eric Mangum, love the guy. One of the best, if not the best, director I worked for. Like, when he took that job, gave me a call and said, "I'm gonna do everything I can to get you here." It didn't work out. Things happen in life, but that was a guy that I would have packed up and been like, all right, let's move to nowhere, Indiana. Let's make it happen, right? There's certain people you do that for. And it's the same way in the NFL. And you've heard so many times, Bob and I say it, former players, coaches say it all the time. Like, the NFL is its own little frat.
Mm-hmm.
And once you're in, you're in. And once you make your buddies, those are buddies for life. And it's going to be the same way with a young offensive mind that, like Bob said, has not a whole lot of play calling experience. He's going to be going through his contacts on his phone and going this, that, and the other, and building his staff. And I think sometimes this goes under the radar, Bob, and you could probably speak to it a little bit better than me, but I think a lot of times when there's a new head coach, who he hires goes under a microscope.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's quite the same microscope for offensive and defensive coordinators, but I think it should be, right? And obviously the head coach is going to have, his hand in the staff, and the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator is going to have their hand in it, and they got to come to a mutual understanding and mutual agreement. But I would say that this is one of those cases where, the offensive coordinator is like one of us and working an office job and goes, well, I just got to get the boss to sign off on it. And the boss essentially says, I'll sign off on whatever you want.
Mhm.
Like, I trust you enough. I'm just going to sign off on it. That's going to be the case. Maybe not here, but I think that happens a lot. And so I think it goes very underrated and will go underrated and under the radar when Kubiak builds this out. And how important and how precise some of these hires need to be. And talking about, your boss signing off on it, like it's equally as important for Dennis Allen, who is on the hot seat this year, right? Like, regardless of a new offensive coordinator, regardless of any shiny new, toys, weapons, players, offensive, defensively, like Dennis Allen's on the hot seat this year. And if the Saints come out and they're terrible, you might see a mid-season firing, which is not common in New Orleans. But, this is going to be something that, to quote your favorite person in the world, Bob, Roger Goodell, they got to get it right. Got to get it right. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But in all honesty, they got to get it right.
Yeah.
From top to bottom. And that starts with Klint Kubiak, and it ends with Klint Kubiak. It's going to be really important to see who he brings in on this roster.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of jobs that depend on this hire being right. The Saints aren't admitting this. Dennis Allen isn't admitting this. So, to be fair, we don't know this for certain. But you got to believe that Dennis Allen's job is on the line in 2024. And if Dennis Allen's job is on the line, that means everybody's job is on the line. Players and coaches both. And as far as the coordinators being sort of under the radar, I don't know if that's going to be the case with Klint Kubiak, mainly because we saw how much criticism Pete Carmichael has gotten over the last 2 years. Hell, we were part of that. Part is some of that criticism that Pete Carmichael has gotten over the last 2 years. So I don't know if Klint Kubiak is going to be under the microscope per se, but there's going to be a lot of people paying close attention to the not only how much this offense improves, but how quickly it does so, because there is going to be growing pains, as you pointed out a few minutes ago. For Klint, it's a low risk, high reward situation because, again, he's a young guy. He's only 37 years old. He has already had success at the NFL level, to at least a moderate degree. So if this thing goes wrong and Dennis Allen gets fired at midseason, or the whole coaching staff gets wiped out at the end of another disappointing season, Klint has ties in the NFL, and again, he's already had moderate success. Being a young guy, he's going to bounce back on his feet relatively quickly. On the flip side, if this thing goes right, Klint gets this offense turned around, the Saints win the NFC South and/or go on at least a small playoff run. All of a sudden, the 37-year-old Klint Kubiak is next year's Ben Johnson, and the guy everybody wants to be their head coach, and the guy that's the center of all the rumors. So yeah, this is very much for you people saying nobody wants to come to work for a coach on the hot seat. Dennis Allen's a defensive guy. Chances are, as you just suggested, as the boss, he's gonna tell Klint, whatever ideas you got for the offense, as long as it works, here you go. This is your team. I'm a defensive guy. I'm not going to meddle very much in what you do. So again, it's the ideal scenario, for Klint Kubiak, and such a low risk, high reward situation for him individually. For the Saints, this has to work. Has to. There's no gray area here.
Yeah, if it's a bad season, I mean, I don't think it's just Dennis Allen that you look at. I think in a way, and it's not this dramatic, but for the sake of, I have a black curtain behind me. I could dim the lights. We could have some poetry, some dramatic things going on.
I can give you one of my cigarettes. You can you can blow a ring of smoke.
Yeah, perfect. It'd be great. I'll get a real raspy voice and we'll talk about the Saints. But no, I mean, I think this is a team that has it has avoided the word rebuild like the plague
Yeah.
for years now, right? And there was multiple times. Talk about the last decade. How many times could we have looked at the Saints and been like, just blow it up, just rebuild it, right? Like 15 comes to mind, 16 especially comes to mind after you did it back-to-back years, just blow it up, 17, 18, 19, and 20 you're hanging on for dear life. But like at the end of 20, you're like, okay, Drew's gone, blow it up. They didn't blow it up, right? And they've continued to stretch the salary cap, which, I'm sure we'll talk all about this offseason as I roll my eyes because we talk about it every offseason, but the Saints find a way every offseason, right? I think if this doesn't work, and, I really think Clint's a great fit, right? I really do. I think he's going to do wonders for this offense, but let's say the offense just hypothetically is terrible and the defense doesn't improve and they show their age a little bit, kind of like they did last year. At this point, you have to, right? There is no more hanging on by a thread. Like you'd have to blow the whole thing up and
Yep.
rebuild and be bad for a few years. And you guys might be saying in the comments, well, we've been bad. No, the Saints have been mediocre, right? Mediocre. If you want to go see bad, go to my backyard.
Yeah.
Right here in Charlotte. You want to see bad, you want to see a mess, right here. It's right out my door. So that's what the Saints, the Saints might not be that bad, but they'd have to revert to that if this doesn't work. So every minuscule piece of this is going to be important. Every free agent signing that Bob and I last year were like, well, that guy would be a really good last receiver on the roster. Like those signings too are going to be put under a microscope. Those signings are going to be important. And guys that, make it work. I'm going to throw one out there like really prematurely, but because he was linked to the Saints last year, and I think he'd be really good in the Kubiak offense, Hunter Renfrow. Okay, I got my early one out. I got it out. We'll talk more about it as it goes on. But no, this is so crucial for the Saints to get right.
You know what? It's my turn then. And I mentioned him in an article that I wrote for the Saints News Network today. Didn't play for the 49ers, but played for Kubiak at one of his other stops. Wide receiver KJ Osborne would be a great fit in this Kubiak system.
Yeah.
Knows it. Willing to accept his role as a third, receiver, and please, I don't want to see Michael Thomas gone, but I think we all agree it's a foregone conclusion. A receiving core of Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, and KJ Osborne. Maybe add a bigger receiver, through the middle rounds, of the draft. Yeah, I will take that for Mr. Derek Carr every day of the week.
Not to mention Alvin Kamara out of the backfield,
yes, sir.
Out of the backfield. And we'll see what happens with the tight end position if Juwan Johnson bounces back. I don't think it's going to happen, but I saw Brock Bowers mocked to the Saints a few times this week. That would be great. But this is all speculation, extremely early.
Yeah.
So Bob got a little bit. We got a little bit of it out. We named 2 receivers we want in New Orleans for next year. I'm also biased, right? Like I'm Carolina kid. Like I'm biased, but I think he'd work really well.
Listen, I like Hunter Renfrow too. I think as much as I would love Osborne in this his system, I agree with you. I think Hunter Renfrow will do really well. But you bring up a great point about maybe not Brock Bowers specifically, although if he's there at 14, I tell you.
Got to.
I'll tell you, I recognize the needs at offensive line. I recognize the needs at edge rusher, linebacker, safety, but to pass up a Brock Bowers, man, I don't think you can if he's there at 14. But again, we'll have plenty of time to speculate on that. But the tight ends position specifically, Alan Ulrich and I talked about this on Under the Dome, not last night, Tuesday night. I believe that Juwan Johnson will have a role in Kubiak's offense, but he's no George Kittle. He's not the type of guy that can get into his routes effectively as an inline tight end. With Juwan, you got to move him around a little bit, put him in motion, H-back in the slot, even out wide, and I think Kubes will do that with Juwan, and Juwan can be successful. Do you think Foster Moreau? I'm not calling Foster Moreau the next George Kittle, not by any stretch. But do you think Foster Moreau can be that kind of effective inline receiver? Or do the Saints have to go out and get one? Does tight end now, inline tight end, now become a bigger need for this team, given the type of system that we think that the Saints are going to run next year?
Yes. Like, I like Foster Moreau a lot. I don't love Foster Moreau being a number one receiving threat inline tight end. Um, you think of some of like the best 1-2 punches at tight end in like NFL history, and there's always one that's like a little bit better as a receiver than the next. And I see him fitting more that number 2 role than I do the number 1 role. And there's been a couple cases, and it's not. I hate to bring up the name, but like it's not always Gronk and Hernandez. Like it doesn't have to be that type of effective, right? To where both those guys could have easily been Pro Bowlers in the same season. That's how good they were
Mm-hmm.
uh, as receiving threats. But we've seen other instances over the years where tight end one is like someone in the. It's hard to say like Kelsey and Kittle because they're like so far above and ahead of everybody else. But you have a guy that's Pro Bowl caliber, but then you go and see tight end number 2 still got like 400 or 500 yards receiving, handful of touchdowns. I mean, I still think that'll be a big number for Foster Moreau, but I like him more there than I do like, hey, Foster, we're really going to need like 750 yards, or 600 yards out of you being number 1. Like, I don't see him being a guy like Ben Watson was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Right when he was in New Orleans and being a guy that could receive. I think one year he did surpass 700 yards in New Orleans. I don't see that being the case for Foster. I don't think it's the biggest need, right? Like, I don't think that's the number one. Like, we got to go get whoever, unless Brock Bowers is there. I think Brock Bowers is a more complete prospect than Kyle Pitts, and people loved Kyle
Mm-hmm.
Pitts coming out of tight end. I think Bowers is a much more NFL ready tight end, not tight end wide receiver hybrid, because that's kind of where I put Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
If he's there, you take him, but I don't see this being like this is the number one thing in free agency. And the other thing too is you and I can speculate all we want on what we think the Saints are going to run under Kubiak, but it's also Kubiak's job to look at the roster and be like, well, this is what I have.
Very good point.
Right? How can I adjust what I do and what I want to the personnel that I have? Like, it's not as easy as just being like, I want this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. It doesn't work like that. And the best coordinators and the best coaches don't just bring the best out of the players they have on the field because it's like, oh, Alvin Kamara is going to fit the system great, or Rashid Shaheed's going to fit the system great. It's also looking at the roster and being like, you're not a great system fit, but how can I still get the best out of you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's going to be a conversation for, Klint in the front office to go, okay, Klint might go and say exactly what you said. I would like to use Jawan more like this, but I still need a guy who can do this. And I don't think Jawan's the best fit to do this. Can we target this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy? And the front office might be like, no, like we can't. We cannot afford to do that, or we have, bigger needs, or whatever the case may be. Or the front office might be like, yeah, give me a short list and we'll see what we can get. And that be that. But that's going to be a big challenge for Clint too, because I don't see Jawan being the only piece on this team, offensively at least, being like not a Kubiak type. Like we were talking about running backs. I think it's important to have a bruiser. I think Jamal Williams would be really good in a one-cut system like that. I think at his age and his speed, it's not the best fit, right? It's an okay fit. I don't know if they still do this in video games, but back in the day, you used to be able to do system fits for like whether it be like 2K or Madden, it would give you like stars. Like, Alvin Kamara system fit 5 stars, love it, right? Jamal Williams might be like 3 stars. Jamal Williams might be a guy that's like just about every system, he's like a 3-star system fit. Like, he's good, it will work, but how does Kubiak utilize that? Because he has a guy like Kamara, he has a guy like Kendre Miller that are much better system fits. But Miller missed a lot of his rookie year.
Mhm.
right? There is a learning curve. So how can you utilize a guy that's got 2 more years left on his contract, that before last year was one of the best running backs in football? Those are the important jobs he's going to have to find. And there's going to be places where he really wants replacements. And like I said, unfortunately, there's going to be some spots at the Saints like, no, we can't do it. Now, offensive line is one that if he goes in and says, I need a dang near new offensive line, the Saints better be like, yes, sir, we got you. You know,
Yeah.
because that was tough. That was tough. I don't want to get too off track here, but did you see Teron Armstead's interview or part of the interview with My Sports Update on Twitter today?
I heard about it. And it sounds like Teron is a guy that might have played his last down of football.
Saying the quote was something along the lines of, when I get to tell my story, when he was asked about the injuries, the toughest injuries he played through, he said, you guys are going to be shocked. And remember, there was like 2 or 3 years there where Tyron would miss like 3 or 4 games, and we'd have concerns on him being out for the season. And then he'd miraculously come back, finish out the year, and you could tell he was playing hurt.
Mhm.
I'm curious how hurt the guy really was.
Mhm.
But that's another topic for another day. Just since we're talking about the offensive line, I found it intriguing. We've breezed through this show with how much we've had to talk about. So the last 10 minutes, we still have weeks to talk about the New Orleans Saints and their offense, and what it's going to look like, and the hires, and when it becomes official next week. We got a lot to talk about. I do want to talk about the Super Bowl, because as much as people in here, like, I want to hear about Saints football, we're all celebrating the Super Bowl on Sunday. Regardless of if you like one team better than the other, you're like Bob and you hope both teams can magically lose. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of storylines. Are the Chiefs now the villains after just a few years ago they were the fun new team? Can Brock Purdy kind of shake off that whole you got carried to the Super Bowl thing? Or is he going to be a guy that we look at in 10, 15 years and go, Rex Grossman, got there, had a really talented team around him, did enough to win football games? Or is Purdy going to come out and have, this breakout performance that really stamps his name as one of the better young quarterbacks in football? Is this the last game of Travis Kelce's career? That's kind of been brought up, just to throw it out there, because I know there's some of you who are going to absolutely just hate what I'm about to say. How does Taylor Swift play into all of this? I'm just kidding. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, I'm so over it. Oh my God. But when I'm seeing like Sports Center post on social media about Taylor shows in Tokyo this night, and if she flies back, I'm like, guys, like, I don't care. And I also don't think that it is anybody's business on whether she's going to be there or not. But I digress. Bob, so many storylines for the Super Bowl. Which storyline are you following the most closely? We kind of hinted at, hey, watch the 49ers offense, see what they can do, see what you like, because that's where you're getting down in New Orleans. But what's the biggest storyline that you're looking at?
I like to challenge myself, and I've said this a couple times through the playoffs. I like to challenge myself and try to figure out Goodell's storyline, because if you're trying to figure out who is going to win, who's going to play in the Super Bowl, who's going to win the Super Bowl, in my opinion, it's all about trying to figure out the storyline that Roger Goodell wants for the WWE Super Bowl event, which is essentially what this has become every single year. And I know I sound like a conspiracy theory or a hoax theorist, but you can't tell me I'm wrong in a lot of these instances. It was funny. My wife Lauren and I were watching the Grammys over the weekend, and I hate award shows. I do. But she puts up with so much from me when she asked me to watch the Grammys with her. And to be fair, I was won over too, because my guy Billy Joel, did his new single, so of course I'm going to stick around for that. But my point is, Taylor Swift won 2 Grammys. And I think that it was on the second one. Lauren turned to me and goes, does this mean that the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl? And I laughed and I said, well, I said, you have arguably the most famous female pop artist in the world. Certainly one of them. 2-time Grammy Award winner this year. And promoting a new album, which she did at the Grammys. Well, what better way for a further promotion of your new upcoming album than on the stage of the Super Bowl with your Super Bowl winning husband, who may or may not retire? That's a great storyline, Roger, for your WWE Super Bowl event. Another one is just shoving the narrative down our throat that Patrick Mahomes is the latest greatest of all time. And that cracks me. I hate the term GOAT. I hate the term greatest of all time because it's just overused now. That's why I say latest greatest of all time. Because the dirt isn't even cold over Tom Brady's career grave, football career grave, and you're already trying to anoint the next greatest of all time, like Brady never existed. Just like you talk about Brady, like Montana and Elway and Marino never existed. Come on, guys. Patrick Mahomes is a great player, yeah, but we don't need this latest greatest of all time, but that's the narrative that the Goodell regime tries to shove down our throat. He being Goodell is such a glory hound. Everything greatest has to happen on his watch. We have to expand this. We have to do this. We have to do that. So he's just cementing his own legacy, by the way, ultimately, I believe is what his goal is. But it's all about trying to figure out the storyline. Or maybe, and these are what I think the storylines are going to end up being. But maybe, as you pointed out, Joe Montana wasn't Joe Montana. Before Super Bowl, his first Super Bowl win, Super Bowl 15, I think it was. Tom Brady wasn't Tom Brady before he beat the Rams in the Super Bowl in the first time. Et cetera, et cetera. Troy Aikman wasn't Troy Aikman until the Cowboys won their first Super Bowl. Is Brock Purdy that next guy? Kyle Shanahan, Christian McCaffrey, Klint Kubiak, all the way back. This is an anniversary of the Broncos Super Bowl teams with Ed McCaffrey, Mike Shanahan, and Gary Kubiak. That's a pretty cool storyline. Not that I can root for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, not as a longtime Saints fan. I still have nightmares of those, Roger Craig, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Steve Young teams. So that's why I'm rooting for a Meteor. I'm rooting for the Meteor to win. Long story short, my prediction for the game is that Kansas City will win 31-27. San Francisco should win this game. They are the better team from top to bottom and in all phases when you examine all phases of the ball put together. But Kansas City is a little bit hotter team right now. And again, trying to figure out Goodell's storylines, I'm going to go with the ones that I mentioned with the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'm glad you brought up how Saints fans can't root for the Niners. I think that's kind of the golden rule. But like I said earlier, I think Kansas City, the team that a lot of people fell in love with, and especially the Tyreek Hill days where they're just putting up points and points and points and points. Like Mahomes has slowly become a villain in the NFL.
Kelsey too.
Whether it's self-induced or not. I think that's interesting. Also, because you said his name, and he still doesn't get enough credit in NFL history. Roger Craig, well before his time, no idea how he has been as disrespected, and his legacy has been as disrespected as it has, because he was unreal. And I know I'm talking before my time, but he was unreal. Like, he would be what you're seeing Christian McCaffrey do now. Like, that's what Craig was doing against teams that had harder hitting defenses, less safety rules. Like, imagine Roger Craig in today's game. It would be crazy. It'd be unreal. Roger Craig, like, you deserve all the love and praise in the world for what you did and revolutionizing what a halfback could be in the NFL.
Yep.
and you don't get enough appreciation for that.
Yep. I often say it's a criminal travesty that Pat Swilling of the Dome Patrol is not in the Hall of Fame, and I will say that till my own grave. It's the offensive criminal tragedy who's not in the Hall of Fame is Roger Craig. If you're as seasoned as I am as a football fan, and you watch Roger Craig, he's a Hall of Fame running back, and you knew it even watching it back then. Yes, overshadowed by obviously Jerry Rice, certainly Joe Montana, and even the coach Bill Walsh was a larger than life figure. But Roger Craig, and Bill Walsh even said through those teams, that Roger Craig was as valuable to the 49ers offensive success every bit as much as Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. That's pretty high praise. Roger Craig deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Shout out to my dad for showing me those tapes as a kid and introducing me to all that, because I was not old enough to appreciate it. Obviously, because those guys were gone and retired by the time I was able to think football.
Thanks, Brendan.
You're welcome. Every show, man. You got it. When it comes to the Super Bowl, I think the Chiefs have the edge for a couple of reasons. One, they've been there, they've done it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might say, well, the Niners were just in the Super Bowl. Yes, but not the same quarterback, a lot of different personnel. I think Brock Purdy's played well. I'm not in the group that thinks like Purdy's the second coming of like this next great long-term quarterback. I do put him in the field of being a guy who has a very talented team around him, is a very high IQ guy, knows his role, and is rarely going to lose you football games.
Yeah, he's a football player. He's more than a game man. He's a football player.
And I appreciated what Alex Smith said, who I think Alex Smith is one of the greatest game managers of recent NFL memory. But when Alex Smith came out and said, no, like as the captain or whatever of game managers, like Brock Purdy's not a game manager, I appreciated that. But I do not see this being kind of like what you were saying, being the moment where Brock Purdy becomes Brock Purdy. I don't see that happening. I don't think the moment's going to be too big for him by any means. But I think that lack of experience is going to hurt. His defense, super good. But so are the Chiefs. The Chiefs' defense is balling right now.
Yeah.
Which is weird because of all things, you have more concerns about the Chiefs' offense than you do the Chiefs' defense right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the Chiefs in this game. I don't think it's going to be as high scoring as your prediction. But I'm going to take the Chiefs 27-21. I think, like I said, I think experience is going to be that key factor, especially in the second half, late in the ball game. I think those are the things that are going to get them, across the finish line. But as we close out, the most important question, Bob, I haven't even asked tonight. And our friend Will is already in bed. But are you watching the Nickelodeon Super Bowl? Or are you watching the adult Super Bowl? Now, to give you guys a hint on where I am in this whole process is I love SpongeBob. Here's my I'm watching the Nickelodeon one. I'm watching Sweet Victory be performed. I don't know if I'll watch it all the way through, I'm being honest, but at least the beginning of it. I remember when the NFL debuted their partnership with Nickelodeon when the Saints played the Bears in the playoffs. I watched the first half, the Nickelodeon version, just because I was like, this is going to be fun. It wasn't as fun, but I think it's a great initiative. Being a kid that grew up on Nickelodeon, I wish I had that as a kid. I think it is a great initiative to get kids not just involved in the sport, but understand the language of the sport. And it's a real educational tool when you can throw our friends, SpongeBob and Patrick on the TV and doing some commentary and whatnot. So are you going to do that? Are you going to let Will watch Nickelodeon Super Bowl?
Listen, I know this probably won't shock you. I'm a Squidward and a Plankton guy. Those are my favorite characters on SpongeBob because we watch SpongeBob a lot in our house
every day.
Sure. Literally every day. Yeah. And I won't lie, I often will just have it on the TV even when Will is at school just for background noise too. So, I choose it over a lot of different programming. my family's annual event is going over to my parents' house, having my mom's world famous lasagna, Italian family, of course, watching the pregame and then watching the Super Bowl, no matter who plays. Now, I boycotted the Super Bowl for a couple years and, basically chain smoked down in their garage or something like that, but I've still gone over. So no, I don't think, unless the parents want to put it on, and if they do, I'm not going to fight it, because anytime I have a chance to get Tony Romo the hell off of my TV and out of my earlobes, I'm a happy guy. So I won't fight it if they want to put the Nickelodeon version on, but I am pretty sure that they won't. But this is also the kind of thing that Nickelodeon will probably replay. So trying to get Will incorporated more into football. I mean, if he'll sit here and tell you that he's a Saints fan, that he likes this team's helmet or that team's helmet. But he really doesn't have any dying interest, any diehard interest in it. Now, having said that, he sat beside me when Kyle Mosley and I interviewed, some guy named Drew Brees this afternoon. Him and Drew even gave a quick wave to each other, and I let him have a chance to look at some of my Brees football cards afterward, to show him who it was he was talking to. That was a pretty cool moment for him. I mean, I think if Nickelodeon replays the game, I might be able to talk Will into watching a little bit of it, but I have a hard time believing that my parents are going to willingly put on a SpongeBob football game. If they do, like I said, I'm not going to fight it, because it gives me a chance to live another Sunday without Tony Romo, which I think everybody's goal in life should be. But I have a feeling I'm going to be Romoized this weekend.
Romoized. How about that? That's a new word we just came up with on this show. We did that one year. I think it was the drafts.
The draft.
I kept count of how many words we made up through our draftathon, and I'm sure we'll do the same thing this year. But yeah, like I said, I think it's a unique initiative. I think it's pretty cool. I wish I had it as a kid.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely at least watch the new CGI'd like Sweet Victory SpongeBob thing that they're playing at the beginning, and then maybe I switch it. I don't know. But with that, Bob, a lot of news this week for the Saints. It's been a busy off season thus far, as we all knew it was going to be. But with that said,
if you'll permit me to interrupt real quick, as of 10:03 Eastern time, East Coast time, they have not yet made the Hall of Fame announcements. We do know that C.J. Stroud is the offensive rookie of the year. Will Anderson is the defensive rookie of the year. So it's the first team since the New Orleans Saints in 2017 to own both offensive and defensive rookie of the years. Kevin Stefanski edged out D'Amico Ryans as coach of the year. Myles Garrett got defensive player of the year. To my knowledge, they haven't announced offensive player of the year. If you caught mine and Kyle Mosley's interview with Drew Brees this afternoon, then at that time we were privileged enough to sit there. As Drew announced, the FedEx offensive player of the year is, or the FedEx Air player of the year is Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. FedEx ground player of the year is Christian McCaffrey of the 49ers. So those are if you care about this kind of thing, those are the postseason award updates as we know them.
Well, we have some important ones to be looking out for, along with some other Saints news. Bob, it seems like there's new news every minute, maybe every hour of every day. You're the one staying on top of it. You, Kyle, John, and Ross over the Saints News Network. So the people that don't already follow you and your colleagues, where can people do that to stay up to date with everything New Orleans Saints this offseason?
Yeah, thanks, folks. And make sure that you do, because we're also going to be doing individual draft profiles, free agency previews, in addition to breaking news. Brendan and I tell you all the time, be very, very careful who you follow this time of year as far as, the breaking news. Us at the Saints News Network, at Saints News on Twitter, and the SI.com team page for the New Orleans Saints. We only report what we know, and we only report where either the source of the news or we're reporting it based off of reliable sources that have reported to us personally. So we're not going to clickbait you. We're not going to give you any bullshit like that. If we're reporting it, it happened. Yeah, and I am gonna, if Jari Evans, fingers crossed, does get elected into the Pro Football Hall of Fame tonight, give a little slip, slip of the tongue. I already have a piece pre-written, so make sure you tune into the Saints News Network at Saints News on Twitter for that. You can also follow me, Bob Rose, on Facebook, at Bobby R2613 on Twitter, and Brendan, myself, all of us on our Bayou Blitz Facebook page, and at Bayou Blitz Pod over on Twitter as well.
For myself, you can follow me on virtually everything at BT Boylan. Make sure you follow Bob and the guys over at the Saints News Network for the latest and greatest there. Wanted to share a little bit of personal news just because it's fun, and you guys have been super supportive of what I've been doing over the last few years as well. I guess it's officially official. So if it's not, I guess I'll get in trouble for opening my mouth. But here goes nothing, right? I wanted to say that I have been officially selected to be a part of the Reel to Reel International Film Festival selection committee for the upcoming year. I have no idea how I got on a selection committee for film, but super honored to do so. Obviously, the film that I was a part of a few years ago did really well in some of these film festivals, but excited to be a part of the journey for this one. And I got to start watching some movies. I got my lists that I have to start giving grades out. So that is my game film for the next few weeks. But wanted to say thank you to the Reel to Reel Film Festival for allowing me to be a part of their selection committee moving forward. So follow along, follow me on Twitter. Some of those movies are going to win some awards from us, go on to win some more awards. So if you're people that want to pay attention to some more indie films, obviously there's going to be some bigger name films that roll through the festival as well. I'm going to give my honest thoughts and opinions, so follow me over there if you guys want a little bit of preview before things hit the big screen.
Congratulations, Brendan. I am so proud of you. That is an awesome achievement. And what a rough life we have. You get to, we both get to watch football for a living and talk about football for a living. And now you just added, you're being forced to watch and talk about movies, as a side career as well. What a rough life we live, man.
I know. I mean, it helps to know people that are in charge of certain things like this, but when I got the call, I think that was my first thing out of my mouth. I was like, I've known you for a long time. What makes me qualified for this? They're like, well, you won filmmaker of the year in the state a few years ago. I was like, yeah, I guess, but does that mean like I'm good enough to like tell you? And they're like, we think so. All right, great. But
Yeah,
hey,
dude, don't ask questions you may not want to know the answers to.
that is true. They might have been very desperate. They're like,
Uh,
anybody want to do it? But I digress. Guys, follow us over on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. Join the Facebook group, the Bayou Blitz Facebook group. I got to check. How many followers are we at? We were at 1.9 for a while. Have we surpassed 1.9 yet?
we have not. Not the last time I checked. Christian McCaffrey is your AP Offensive Player of the Year, by the way.
Deservingly so. Should be the
Yes.
MVP as well. But that's just me. He had a stellar year, like one of the best years by a running back that I've seen. But with all that said, guys, we will be back next week for the Bayou Blitz. Are we going to go on Valentine's Day? That's something we can talk about.
Man, I don't know.
Do I need it's really late for me to make dinner reservations, but I might, yeah.
Yeah, stay tuned for that one. We may not be use our power to change change space and time by moving our show. Our significant others might do it for us next week. So yeah, stay tuned for that one.
Katie and Laura might have a word or two about that. But guys, until next week, thanks so much for the love and support. Follow everything. Like I said, Saints News Network, that's the place to go for all of your reliable information, as Bob likes to say. Until next week, find some, spread some love. Wow, I messed that up. How do I mess up my own thing? Wow, it's late. Spread love, practice positivity. We'll see you next week for the Bayou Blitz podcast. See you then.